So our gospel story for today, it gives me a little bit of whiplash, okay? And here's why. We just celebrated Easter. Our Sunday readings have been pretty chronological up until this point. We heard shouts of Hosanna. We watched Jesus bend down to wash his disciples' feet. We tried not to look away when Jesus was nailed to the cross. We whispered in wonder when that tomb was empty. And then our whispers turned into those shouts of Hosanna. We mirrored Thomas when we wanted to see Jesus' wounds, just to be really sure that the resurrection was real. And we just had breakfast on the beach with our resurrected Jesus last Sunday. And now today, we are way back in John chapter 10. It's very out of order with a very pre-Easter Jesus who has not been betrayed or died or resurrected. So today, as we will still shout, "He is risen," we read and remember about the before. And then we kind of try and see what it could mean for us in this post-Easter world. Okay, so let's get some context under our feet to know where Jesus is in this story, and then maybe that's going to help us figure out where we are too. Okay, so John chapter 10, verse 22. Let's listen to that opening verse again together. At this time, the festival of the dedication took place in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the portico of Solomon. Okay, the festival of dedication is better known to us as Hanukkah. And actually, the word Hanukkah is Hebrew for dedication. Makes sense, right? Now we know. And so just as a little reminder for all of us, okay, Hanukkah is the holiday that our Jewish brothers and sisters celebrate every year. And when they're celebrating this holiday, they're remembering back to a time 2nd century BCE, a very, very long time ago, when the Holy Land was ruled by the Syrian Greeks. And then, against all odds, a very small band of very faithful Jews were able to reclaim back their temple, the most sacred and holy place for them. They were able to take it back. So they rededicated their temple by lighting some candles, and they only had oil enough for one day for these candles. Well, the candles burned for 8. And so every year they celebrate Hanukkah, they celebrate the festival of dedication to honor and remember this miracle. Okay, so Jesus in our story today, he is standing in this very old and very sacred part of the temple. The very same temple I was just talking about with the original rededicating and re-remembering. And as usual, Jesus is drawing a crowd, right? But this time, the people gathered around him, they have come to town to celebrate Hanukkah together. Now, no doubt, they have heard some wild rumors, or they have listened to Jesus' sermons or witnessed one of his mind-boggling miracles. They know about him. They're not unfamiliar with this teacher from Nazareth. They understand that he is complex and a little bit elusive. And so they ask this question today: how long are you going to keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, just tell us plainly. Now, on one hand, their question today in this post-Easter time frame of ours can seem a little out of place. We just celebrated the plainest, clearest, most irrefutable proof of Jesus' messiahship possible, right? We have already stood with Thomas as he placed his hands inside Jesus' wounds. So how are we still going to be in suspense after the resurrection? And then on the other hand, I think their timing feels a little spot on. Faith is rarely this clean, linear timeline from confusion to clarity, or from doubt to trust. Instead, faith is like this circle. And really, faith is like this cycle, a perpetual cycle of knowing to unknowing to knowing, of unbelief to belief to unbelief again, to Christ is risen, to if you are the Messiah, just tell us plainly, to Christ is risen again. And it's not spiritual weakness, it's real life. And if you find yourself in that story today, right with that crowd, asking Jesus to just speak plainly, know that I'm right there with you too. And in church, we get to tell the truth, right? So here's my confession. I really appreciate the question that the crowds are asking today. I think it exposes so much authenticity. The pain that they're experiencing, the longing and the yearning that they want to be towards Jesus for answers and for comfort. It's so relatable to me. How many of us right now have prayers that sound like, if you are? It's so authentically pleading. Jesus, if you are good. Jesus, if you are all powerful, if you are loving, if you are real, if you are the Messiah, then fix it. Then answer my prayers. Stop hiding when I long for your presence. Heal my loved ones. Stop allowing all this injustice to exist. Show up, speak plainly, act decisively. Take this world of swirling, brewing chaos, and please just make it right. So back in the day, when I was in seminary, we were taught how to write sermons, right? Many different ways, but one of the methods that we were taught to write is this 4-part sermon. So part number 1, you preach about a problem with the text. Part number 2 of your sermon is then you preach about a problem in the world. You may see where this is heading. Part number 3 of the sermon is that you preach the good news of the text. Part number 4 is then that leads you to the good news for the world, right? It reflects this concept we like to call as Lutherans law and gospel. And it allows the preacher to wrestle with the entire scope of whatever Jesus is teaching about for the day. So I was thinking about this sermon writing method while reading John chapter 10. Because if we're just reading the story quickly, we're skimming through it, or we're reading it just at face value, there seems to be a huge problem with the text. And I don't, just to be super clear, I don't think the problem is the question that the crowds are asking. To me, their question is beautiful and honest and raw. I can hear desperation and longing in their voices, and my voice is tied to theirs. My problem is Jesus' reply. Jesus answers their question by saying, I have told you, and you don't believe. And sometimes I can't help but hear this discernible impatience in his voice. And then he says that icy clincher, you do not believe because you do not belong to my sheep. So when we have a problem like this in the text, when we don't know what to do, when it seems un-Jesus-y, it is the perfect time to start asking questions, okay? It is the perfect time to dig into it, to wrestle with it, rather than just skim over it or pretend it doesn't exist or walk away, okay? So I wrestled with this problem this week. Why would Jesus be telling the crowds that they don't believe or that they don't belong? Now, the easy dodge for us would be to say that this reply doesn't apply to us at all. After all, here we are at church. After all, we know our scriptures. We say our prayers. We love our liturgy. Surely we both believe and belong. Problem solved. But what about that perpetual cycle of the knowing and the unknowing, or the belief and the unbelief? What about the times we call out our "if you are the Messiah" pleads and prayers? I think it's a little cheap to excuse ourselves from this reply and think we're superior to it all. And I also think this is where dangerous theology is born, and we create a complex of us versus them. So we're not going to do that. So I dug into these questions more, and this is the good news I heard. So at first glance, Jesus' reply really does sound like exclusion. You don't believe, so you don't belong. A very us versus them with this big fat Sharpie line drawn down the middle. But I read that line over and over again. And the more I heard it, the more I came to hear the exact opposite. You struggle to believe because you're choosing not to belong. You struggle to believe because you don't have a relationship with me yet. In other words, what Jesus is saying right now is that belief doesn't come first. It can't come first. Belonging does. Belonging comes first, and then belief will follow. That is the hope and the consolation for me. According to this text, whatever belief I arrive at in this life will not come from the ups and downs of my own spiritual, emotional, physical life. It will not come from a creed. It will not come from a doctrine or a very cleverly worded sermon. It will come from the daily, hourly business of belonging to Jesus' flock, of walking in the footsteps of the shepherd, living in the company of fellow sheep, and listening in real time to the voice of the ones whose classroom is rocky hills and hidden pastures and deep shadowed valleys. To belong is to follow Jesus to all of these places, places of both tranquility and treachery, of both trust and doubt. So, here's more good news that I heard then. There really is no us versus them. All are welcome in this pasture. Jesus is not telling the crowds today, you can't belong. He's telling them, you don't belong yet, because we don't have a relationship yet. And Jesus wants that relationship with all of us. More good news, Jesus, aka the Good Shepherd, never mentions the type of quality of sheep that he desires. The shepherd never holds auditions. The shepherd never bases their protection and love and concern for their sheep on how the sheep look or feel or behave. That is never mentioned as a basis for belonging. All the shepherd wants is for you to just be a sheep. Here's what I think this all circles back to. In this post-Easter world, where we are simultaneously shouting, Christ is risen, and if you are the Messiah, tell us plainly, we still get to belong. We still get to choose to step into that sometimes very muddy pasture and let Jesus be our shepherd, no matter the questions and doubts and hardships that we're struggling with. So what does that actually look like in real life? We get to choose to call the church office and ask that our name be added to a prayer list when we receive a hard medical diagnosis, or we have an upcoming surgery, or we had a death in the family. We get to choose to come to Sunday school or confirmation or youth group when we're not really sure what we believe, but we are sure that we have a lot of questions. We get to choose to come to church on Sundays, even when our kids are young and we have zero faith that we're going to get through a service without a meltdown. I swear that was written down. because I was talking about my own kids. And we get to choose to send our seniors who are graduating out into new pastures and be both simultaneously terrified and so proud. And we get to choose to come up to this table every time and bring our whole selves forward, flawed and frayed and fabulous, and know that we are receiving a meal that is all for us, forgiveness and grace and mercy for us. We get to choose to pray, even when we're not sure how our prayers are going to be answered. Just be a sheep. That's enough. Belong, be real, and be you. And then belief will follow. Amen.